The airport was buzzing with the usual chaos. People dragging suitcases, announcements blaring overhead, and travelers rushing to their gates. The tension of travel was everywhere, but for me this was different. Today felt like a win. After months of relentless overtime, late nights, and pushing myself to the brink, I had finally done it. Booked a first-class ticket. Just this once. I wanted to treat myself, to escape the cramped rows and stale peanuts of economy and experience what luxury in the skies felt like. I boarded early, feeling a mix of excitement and pride. The wide leather seats, the promise of gourmet meals, and the personal attention. This was going to be amazing. As I stowed my carry-on and settled into my seat, I let out a deep breath. The space was incredible. The flight attendant greeted me warmly, offering me a drink even before the rest of the passengers began to board. Ice clinked in my glass as I sipped, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, soaking it all in. Moments later, I heard the first sign of trouble. Loud, rapid footsteps stomping down the aisle. A sharp voice cut through the murmurs of other passengers. "Excuse me, excuse me." The voice was shrill, demanding. Heads turned as a woman in a bright red blazer and oversized sunglasses stormed forward. Her blonde hair was teased into a perfect helmet of curls, and her clattering heels seemed to punctuate her fury. She stopped right beside me, tossing her designer bag onto the empty seat next to mine. "You're in my seat," she barked, voice sharp enough to turn heads again. I blinked, trying to register her words. "I'm sorry, my seat," she repeated, louder this time, emphasizing each word like I was a toddler. "First class seat 3A. That's me." I glanced at my ticket, then at the small plaque beside my armrest. "Oh, this is 3A, I said calmly, turning the ticket toward her. Her face twisted in disbelief. "No," she snapped. "You need to check again." "I'm positive," I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "No, I am positive," she shot back, her voice rising. "This is my seat. I fly first class all the time, and I know how this works." By now, nearby passengers were watching intently. A businessman one row over peered above his newspaper. A mother in the row ahead glanced nervously over her shoulder. I felt my face flush with embarrassment, but I refused to move. "Ma'am," a flight attendant chimed in, approaching quickly. "Is everything all right?" "No," the woman shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. "This person is in my seat." The flight attendant, a calm and professional man in his late 30s, turned to me. "Can I see your ticket, sir?" I handed it over. He gave it a quick glance, then turned back to her. "Ma'am, this is his assigned seat. May I see your ticket?" Karen, I didn't know her name yet, but she fit the title perfectly, huffed dramatically, and rummaged through her purse. She produced a crumpled boarding pass, flinging it toward the attendant like a challenge. He unfolded it, then sighed. "Ma'am, you're in 9C. That's in the main cabin." Her face turned crimson. "That's impossible," she spat. "I booked first class. I always fly first class." "I understand, but this ticket says 9C, the attendant said patiently. "No, no, no," she snapped, shoving her phone in his face. "Look, I booked first class. Right here. It says first class." The flight attendant glanced at her phone, then frowned. "Ma'am, it seems there may have been a change in your seating. Let me contact the gate agent and see if we can sort this out." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Don't bother, just move him," she said, jabbing her finger in my direction, like I was luggage. "Excuse me," I blurted. "You can put him back in economy. I paid for this seat." "No," the flight attendant said firmly, stepping between us. "This gentleman has a confirmed first-class ticket, and this is his assigned seat." Karen's face twisted with fury. "I don't care. I demand you fix this." Her voice climbed higher, sharp and grating. "I fly this airline all the time. I'm practically VIP." The flight attendant's patience thinned. "Ma'am, I'm asking you to please calm down." "No, I want your supervisor. I want the captain. I want everyone here right now." Passengers were fully tuned in by now. Some murmured, a few chuckled quietly. Karen, either oblivious or undeterred, continued her rant. "I'm calling my lawyer," she shrieked. "This is discrimination. You're targeting me because I'm a woman. I'll have this airline shut down." Her voice cracked with rage as she whipped out her phone, pretending to dial someone. The flight attendant, now clearly exhausted, stepped back with a forced smile. "I'll go speak to my supervisor," he said before disappearing down the aisle. I sighed, hoping this was over, but Karen wasn't done. She turned back to me, her lip curled in disgust. "You know what?" she sneered. "You probably scammed your way up here. These airlines let anyone in these days." I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "I worked hard for this," I said evenly. "I paid for this seat." "Yeah, right," she scoffed. "Enjoy it while it lasts, because you're going back to economy once the captain gets here." I said nothing, just turned my gaze out the window. The terminal's busy ground crew bustled outside, their movements oddly soothing compared to the storm brewing inside the plane. Moments later, the flight attendant returned, now joined by a second crew member, taller, more serious. Karen's triumphant smile returned. "Oh good," she said smugly, "someone with authority." "Ma'am," the new crew member said firmly, "there's been a change in your reservation. You were moved to 9C. Unfortunately, first class is full, and this passenger has a confirmed seat here." Karen's mouth flopped open, a stunned gasp escaping her. "No, you don't understand. I deserve this seat." "Ma'am," the crew member cut her off. "You need to take your assigned seat, or we'll have to ask you to leave the plane." Karen's eyes flicked between me and the attendants, her face twitching with disbelief. "I'm not going anywhere," she hissed. "Then we'll have to call security," the crew member said firmly. For a second she froze, calculating her next move. Then, like flipping a switch, Karen's voice dropped to a sickly sweet tone. "Fine," she said, snatching her purse from the seat beside me, "but I will be writing a letter to corporate." I didn't respond. I just sipped my drink and watched her stomp down the aisle. Passengers applauded softly, and I couldn't help but smile. The seat was mine, and peace had returned. For now. The atmosphere on board remained tense even after Karen's dramatic retreat to economy. Passengers murmured among themselves, some still chuckling about her meltdown. I leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes, and hoping for a calm flight ahead. That peace didn't last long. Just as the last few passengers boarded, and the flight attendants began their safety checks, I heard her voice again, sharp and piercing, carrying from several rows back. "I need to speak to the captain now." Karen's screech cut through the cabin. I cracked one eye open. Sure enough, she was standing in the aisle, arms crossed tightly, glaring toward the front. A flight attendant approached her, speaking softly enough that I couldn't make out the words. Whatever was said only seemed to enrage her further. "I don't care what you say," Karen snapped, her voice growing louder. "I paid for first class, and I am not sitting back here like some peasant." The murmurs intensified. Passengers groaned. Someone muttered, "Oh great, here we go again." Moments later, the taller crew member, the one who had threatened to call security earlier, appeared. His expression was stone cold as he addressed her. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice. If you continue to disrupt this flight, we'll have to remove you from the aircraft." "Oh, you think you're so powerful, huh?" Karen sneered. "You can't throw me off this flight. I'm an elite member. I know my rights." The flight attendant's patience had clearly worn thin. "Ma'am, you're not an elite member. Your account was flagged for previous incidents. That's why your reservation was changed." For a split second, Karen's face froze, her confidence faltering. Then she exploded. "You're lying," she spat. "That's impossible." "I'm afraid it's not," he said coolly. "You were downgraded because of an incident on your last flight, where you verbally assaulted another passenger." Passengers gasped. Someone snorted with laughter. Karen's face contorted in disbelief. "That's not true," she shrieked. "This is discrimination. This is harassment. I will sue you." The crew member didn't flinch. "Ma'am, you have two options. Sit quietly in your assigned seat, or we'll have security escort you off this flight." Her gaze darted around the cabin, searching for allies. "Did anyone else hear this?" she yelled. "He's lying." No one responded. Instead, most passengers looked away, avoiding her gaze. Even those closest to her shrank back, as if her anger might somehow burn them too. "I'm warning you," the crew member said, voice firm. "If you refuse to comply, you will not be flying today." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Fine," she hissed, turning on her heel, and storming back toward her seat. For a moment, It seemed like the ordeal was over. The crew returned to their positions, and the pilot's voice came over the speakers, announcing the imminent departure. The engines hummed to life, the plane slowly rolling away from the gate. But Karen wasn't done. Just as the plane began taxiing, she shot out of her seat again. This time, she marched straight toward first class. "This isn't over," she barked, pointing directly at me. "I know what you did." I blinked, caught completely off guard. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "You switched seats with someone, didn't you?" She sneered. "I bet you bribed the airline to bump me down. People like you are always scheming." "What?" I stammered, baffled by her accusation. "You're a liar," she hissed. "I know you didn't pay for that seat." Before I could respond, the crew member returned with a look of sheer frustration. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and deadly serious. "This is your final warning. Sit down." But Karen wasn't backing down. "I want proof," she demanded. "I want to see his booking record. I want to see his receipt." "Ma'am, you are not entitled to any passenger's personal information," he shot back. "And if you don't return to your seat immediately, I will call security the moment we're back at the gate." For a brief moment, Karen seemed to consider her options. Then, in a move that stunned everyone, she flung herself onto the floor. "I'm having a medical emergency," she wailed, clutching her chest. "I can't breathe." Passengers gasped, some sitting upright in concern. A flight attendant grabbed an oxygen mask from the wall and rushed toward her, but the crew member's sharp gaze never wavered. "Call medics," he said calmly, to the nearest flight attendant, "and tell the gate agent we're coming back." At that, Karen's eyes snapped open. No, I'm fine," she stammered, scrambling to her feet. The crew member didn't hesitate. "Too late," he said. The plane jerked as the engines powered down, and moments later, the aircraft began taxiing back toward the terminal. Karen's face twisted in horror as she realized what was happening. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "I'm fine." "No, you claimed a medical emergency," the crew member said flatly. "We take those seriously." Passengers chuckled quietly, and a few even applauded as Karen's face flushed crimson. By the time the plane returned to the gate, security was waiting. 2 uniformed officers boarded the aircraft, their stern expressions making it clear they meant business. "Ma'am," one of them said firmly, "please gather your belongings." "I'm not leaving," Karen barked. "I'm a victim here." The officer didn't flinch. "Either you walk off or we escort you off." Karen's eyes flicked wildly around the cabin, looking for anyone to defend her. Finding none, she stomped back to her row, yanked her bag from the overhead compartment, and marched toward the exit. As she passed me, she paused. "I'll have your job," she sneered at the flight attendant. Then she turned to me, "And I'll make sure you never get upgraded again." I just smiled. "Safe travels," I said sweetly. The moment she was gone, the entire cabin erupted in applause. The flight crew thanked everyone for their patience, and the plane prepared to depart, this time, in blissful silence. Hours later, when we finally landed, a passenger from economy stopped me just before we reached baggage claim. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, grinning. "I recorded the whole thing." "You did?" I laughed. "Oh yeah," she said, holding up her phone. "I'm posting this tonight. It's gold." Sure enough, 2 days later, Karen's meltdown was all over social media. Her exaggerated gasps, her tantrum about suing the airline, and her shameless attempt to fake a medical emergency. The internet, as expected, was ruthless. Memes popped up everywhere, mocking her with captions like "First Class Karen, Queen of Meltdowns." I couldn't help but laugh. I hadn't planned on going viral, but after everything that happened, it felt like justice had been served. One click at a time, the flight finally took off without further disruption, and I allowed myself to relax, sinking deeper into the plush first-class seat. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the hum of the engines became a soothing background noise. Flight attendants moved gracefully through the aisle, offering drinks and warm towels. The chaos from earlier felt like a distant memory, but the lingering tension from Karen's outburst still clung to the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that something else might happen. People like Karen rarely accepted defeat quietly. Even with her off the plane, my mind replayed her threats.
I'll make sure you never get upgraded again." Her voice echoed in my head, and for a moment I wondered if she'd follow through. The flight attendants, still on edge from the earlier ordeal, seemed especially attentive. One of them stopped by my seat with a warm smile. "Thanks for being so patient earlier," she said. "People like her, well, you never know what they'll pull." "I was just glad she didn't try anything worse," I replied, half joking. "Oh, she did," the attendant said with a wry smile. "We found her trying to sneak back on board after security walked her out." My eyebrows shot up. "You're kidding." "Wish I was," she said, chuckling. "They caught her in the terminal trying to book another flight. Same airline, same destination. She told the gate agent she forgot her laptop on the plane." "Did she?" "Of course not," she said, lowering her voice. "She just didn't want to admit defeat." The absurdity of it all made me laugh. The flight attendant grinned, handed me an extra snack from the cart, and moved on. By the time dinner service arrived, I was finally at ease. Plates of perfectly arranged food replaced the usual foil-wrapped airline fare. I savored the moment, the rare luxury of cutting into a real steak at 35,000 feet. The hours passed quietly. After that, the earlier chaos fading into nothing more than an amusing travel story. When we landed, I felt relief wash over me. I grabbed my bag from the overhead compartment and shuffled into the aisle with the rest of the passengers. The atmosphere felt lighter now, strangers exchanging grins as if we'd collectively survived something wild together. As I reached the baggage claim, I heard a voice call out, "Hey!" I turned to see a woman from economy jogging up behind me, her phone in hand. She was grinning like she had a secret. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, her face practically glowing. "I recorded the whole thing." "The whole thing?" I asked. "Oh yeah," she chuckled. "Karen's meltdown, her fake medical emergency, everything. I just posted it. People are loving it." I laughed. "I can't believe you caught all that." "It's already blowing up," she added, scrolling through her phone. "I think this might go viral." I shook my head in disbelief. Guess Karen's about to be famous. Over the next few days, the video exploded across social media. Clips of Karen's tantrum racked up millions of views. People turned her exaggerated gasps and dramatic accusations into memes. There were gifs of her clutching her chest with captions like, "When you realize economy doesn't serve champagne," and voiceovers that mocked her threats to sue the airline. I even stumbled across one parody video where someone reenacted her meltdown with a wig and sunglasses shouting, "I demand to speak to the captain," before flopping dramatically to the floor. The internet wasn't kind to Karen, and she didn't handle it quietly. Rumors spread that she tried to scrub her online presence, filing complaints against social media platforms in an attempt to have the footage removed. But the harder she fought, the more people reposted the video. Then came the inevitable fallout. News outlets picked up the story, digging into Karen's past. It turned out her previous downgrade wasn't just a one-off mistake. She had a history of causing scenes on flights. One airline rep even confirmed she'd been banned from another carrier the year before for berating a flight attendant over a misplaced drink order. It wasn't long before her face became infamous. The tabloids dubbed her first-class Karen, and even late-night talk shows had a field day with her antics. Comedians imitated her meltdown, mimicking her exaggerated gasp as she clutched her chest like she was performing Shakespeare. For weeks it seemed like Karen's face was everywhere. Then one morning, while scrolling my phone, I stumbled upon something unexpected, an apology video. There she was, sitting in her living room, looking far less composed than she had been on the flight. Her hair, once perfectly styled, now hung limp. Her eyes, usually sharp and cold, looked puffy from what I guessed was hours of stress. She began, her voice breaking. "I just want to say how sorry I am." She paused, swallowing hard. "I let my frustration get the best of me. I wasn't thinking clearly, and I said things I regret." I watched, half expecting her to blame the airline or spin the story to paint herself as the victim. But to my surprise, she continued, her voice quieter now. "The truth is, I was having a rough week. That doesn't excuse what I did, but I know I hurt people with my behavior, and I'm truly sorry." The comments were a battlefield. Some people believed her apology was sincere, while others mocked her attempt at damage control. Personally, I wasn't sure what to think. Part of me believed she deserved the backlash, but another part couldn't ignore how beaten down she looked. Life moved on, and eventually, the internet found its next big scandal. Karen's meltdown became just another viral relic, still memed, but no longer a hot topic. Months later, I found myself back at the airport, waiting for another flight. As I stood in line at a cafe, I noticed someone a few feet away. Karen. She was quieter now, her posture less rigid. No flashy sunglasses, no designer blazer, just a woman quietly stirring sugar into her coffee. For a moment, I considered saying something, maybe offering some closure, but I didn't. Instead, I turned back to the cashier, paid for my coffee, and found a seat near my gate. About 10 minutes later, a barista called out, "Caramel macchiato for Karen." I glanced over and watched her stand to collect her drink. Just before she turned away, her eyes flicked in my direction, a flicker of recognition flashing across her face. For a moment, she looked like she might say something, but instead, she just gave me a small, tired smile, a hint of humility behind it. Before walking away, I smiled back, quietly hoping she'd learn something from it all. Some people never change, but maybe, just maybe, Karen had.